Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. I'm Jon Najarian, Pete Najarian joining shortly, and we're going to be talking about the shorts actually having a pretty good day today, and that's because President Trump says he doesn't want too many exceptions, put that in quotes, on his tariffs. So he went from lenient to strict. We'll see how it plays out on April 2nd. Bang! On the Rebel's Edge.
Here we go. We got a lot going on today, Jon.
We do. I mean, the president just moments ago said he didn't want too many exceptions. The market took a dip at that point because S&Ps were pretty flat prior. They slipped a little ahead of this because apparently some of it leaked. And then the president said, yeah, I don't want too many exceptions. The S&Ps dropped, the Dow dropped, and the NASDAQ dropped about 1.5%, 1.6%. Pretty big moves, Pete.
Yeah. Well, that is not what they wanted to hear, they being everybody. They didn't want to hear that things were expanding past the targeted range that people started feeling pretty good about that, Jon. On Monday, Tuesday, we held on to those gains, but now we're giving some back a little bit right now.
Yep. And I'd say keep in mind, if you're a trader, then you can be zoomed in. But if you're an investor, you should be zoomed out. You should not be paying attention to very short-term gyrations in the market, like the recent rally, which was preceded by a sell-off, or now this sell-off. If you're an investor, be an investor. If you're a trader, you got to do what you got to do. Let's do what we got to do, Pete, and talk about Macro Minute.
Let's do it.
So, Macro Minute, durable goods orders today showed an increase, which was contrary to forecasts. So that could signal resilience. Certain sectors of the U.S. economy, of course, are going to react to that. Broader uncertainty, like what the president just reintroduced, is the other side of that coin, Pete.
Yeah, the president's got people a little bit confused right now because of that reaction and what he had to say. Which probably shouldn't surprise us anymore. I mean, this has been a pretty wild ride ever since we got in there and he got in there in inauguration and all the rest of it. But consumer sentiment, Jon, I just look at that, and I see it and I'm like, wow, this is pretty interesting. And is it a false narrative? You brought this up yesterday and I'm bringing it up again because of the fact that I look at the price of eggs. They're down 66% in the quarter. The price of orange juice is down 45% in the quarter. The price of gasoline is down 11% year over year. Those are all things that I think should be a little bit of a part of where the sentiment should be looking. And I'm kind of like our good friend at Bank of America, Moynihan. I swear to you, Jon, I think there's some odd manipulation going on right now. And, the media is responsible for a lot of it.
Yeah, what a shock.
Yeah.
The media is trying to sway public opinion. Any of these things happen, Pete, to the upside, if eggs were going up again, which they're not, gasoline going up, which it's not, and so forth, you would see headlines. But instead, they have to look really hard to not talk about what you just covered. Mm-hmm. All right, let's dive into fantastic futures. And I'm going to say, Pete, that it's natural gas. And I would encourage you guys to take a look at this chart because it shows a pretty volatile natural gas contract that's now down about 60 cents from the recent highs, Pete.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, Jon, just to see what natural gas is doing. And we've talked about it. They had a hell of a run to the upside. And now all of a sudden, a little bit different. I'll tell you what, keep a close eye on the 10-year as well. And the reason I say that is we're up around 434, somewhere close to that level. We were at 418 just a week ago. Now, you just go back a couple of weeks ago, Jon, and I'll tell you what you're going to see. You're going to see the volatility index was trading at 2960. This morning, we were in the very, very low 17s. That's changing a little bit with this big turn in the market from what the president was talking about. But nonetheless, we're still in the 17s. That is a heck of a sharp move to the downside. It took about 2 weeks to get to the upside. Took a little bit faster turn to get down to the downside. It's exactly what we've been laying out, though, Jon. That is how volatility works. You get those spikes and you get those pullbacks, both of which are in a pretty similar time frame most of the time.
Very true, Pete. Well, We do want to let you guys know that Pete, that guy right there, is going to be available at the market close tomorrow, Thursday. And he, Mark Lepresti, Greg McDermott, Ryan Mastro will be showing you guys about cash flow. I wish I had my cash flow hat, Pete.
Yeah, you should have the cash flow,
for
man.
the 3 at 3 hat. But they're going to be talking about cash flow. So if you've got stock holdings and you want to know how you could make them cash flow bigger than just getting a pesky little dividend, they're going to show you how tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time, right at market close. You got to register. So check out that spot right there that you see on the screen and go register. All right, let's talk now, Pete, for a sec about GameStop, because this went from being just a meme stock to maybe they're trying to get involved a little heavier in digital assets, in particular Bitcoin. They're closing a bunch of stores. They're focusing more on when they have excess treasury, using Bitcoin as the area that they go into instead of U.S. treasuries and so forth. I think more firms are going to be doing this, Pete, and certainly it's good for a nice pop out of GME today.
Yeah, it got unanimous approval by the board, John. So they were all in on this whole idea. And boy, the way, what does this remind me of? I'm trying to think. Oh, Michael Saylor, maybe? Sounds a little bit familiar. That has been an incredible run and something, and this looks a lot like it, John. They got $4.3 billion in cash sitting out there. They've got all these tokens. They've got a lot of different things. There is a lot of reasons why this probably is going to be something that's going to turn into a little bit more of a trend. I don't think this is the end of it. I think we're going to see a whole lot more of this, John. They've already had themselves. They've got digital assets, wallet, and this, that, and the other. I think this is a pretty bold move by GameStop and something that obviously the board's excited about. I think the CEO's excited about. I think a lot of people are excited about it, including you and I. This is pretty interesting. And I'll tell you what, the shorts have come in dramatically of late. And so this is not a squeeze, because a lot of those guys were like, hey, look, we're going to cover some of this. Something's going on. Well, this is what's going on.
Indeed. Well, how about this one, Pete? DLTR. So these guys bought Family Dollar for $9 billion a few years ago. Wasn't just last year or anything. But if you ever overpaid for something, folks, and you felt bad about it, imagine these guys. They paid $9 billion. They are now punting it for basically $1 billion. They're selling it to Brigade Capital and McCallum Capital. This is just a horrible trade, Pete. And obviously, even though the stock's getting a little bit of a lift for the news that they're getting rid of this thing, what a moronic thing to do, to spend that much money and then to punt it out just a couple of years later for an $8 billion write-off.
Yeah, it's about as ugly as I've ever seen, John. And yeah, the stock's up 6% today. Well, you know what I think of that? This is a stock that when you look at the 52-week low of 60 and you look at the high of 137, and here we are at 71, some of that coming from today on this 6% move. This is just awful. And by the way, they also mixed in some guidance on the earnings and so forth where didn't look all that great. And that's a little bit disturbing to me as well. So it's kind of like you're hiding a little bit of this over here, and then you're actually out front with this awful $8 billion loss. That's pretty brutal. And you know, credit to those that are buying it for $1 billion, because I think that's probably a steal. The $9 billion that they paid, that's ugly. And I'll tell you what, heads should roll. I don't know if they are, but I think heads should roll on this one, John.
Well, Pete, this deal happened, or it was announced in 2014. Not sure when it closed, but that's 11 years ago. So they have got some of the revenue. I'm not going to say, oh, you know, it's a total $8 billion wipeout. It is a wipeout from what they paid for it, but obviously they were buying it in part, at least, to compete against, you know, the other players out there in this space, you know, because it's Dollar Tree, Dollar General, and Family Dollar, and they decided this would make them bigger and stronger. I'm not so sure that it did.
Right.
All right. What about Worthington Industries, Pete? These guys, basically Columbus, Ohio, so middle of America manufacturer. They said they had a profit of 79 cents and adjusted earnings after their restructuring costs were about 91 cents. They're a metal manufacturer. Revenue was over $304 million. So a pretty damned good report, and the stock responding very positively to show, I guess, the world that, yeah, tariffs, they are an effect, but they don't mean that's the end of profitability for these companies. Keep that in mind, folks.
Yeah. When you look at those earnings, John, they absolutely crush it. 91 cents. They're looking for 70 cents. Not so bad, right? You look at some of the other things. When you look at the operating margin up 24% from 13%, I'd say that's a pretty damn big win as well. So across the board, they are doing everything right. Stock was up 20+% last I looked. It's getting closer towards that 52-week high. And we're talking about what you were saying. I mean, you look at the metals, and people were very concerned about all this stuff. Worthington is showing, you know what? We've still got steady order flows. They're in the right spot. The distribution is strong. The manufacturing base is very, very strong as well. They use the word robust. I'll use it as well. Free cash flow, John, that's also up. That's up from being up 12% to up 14%. So everywhere you look, these numbers look pretty damn good for Worthington, a stock that not very many people follow, but maybe they should, because it's a pretty interesting one. And you and I have talked about this one in the past as well here on the Rebel's Edge. This is a really, really quality company that seems to be able to maneuver itself wherever the economy is. And so far, so great right now.
Right. Well, and then we've got a double upgrade today, Pete. Another, I mean, apparently Bank of America, they don't just upgrade, from, for instance, an underperform to a buy, which they did here, but they also upgrade their target price. So they're doing double upgrades across the board. What is that telling you, Pete? And why isn't that on the front page of more and more of these financial news sites? I'll tell you why, because they don't like winning. But this one, PLTK, getting that double upgrade. Our guy, Jeff Garbaz, Pete, who runs the Rebel Squeeze Play for us.
Yep.
He has great data, and he says, hey, Squeeze Play says short intensity was 96%, so it'll take 7 days to cover. Well, that means this might not just be a one and done pop.
Yeah, anytime you get a double upgrade on something that, John, it was all the way down. I mean, honestly, you look at the 52-week low and high, you're talking about just underneath 4 on the low side, and the upper end, you're looking at $9. Well, the stock's at 540. I think there is plenty of more room there. I agree with Jeff. I mean, Jeff, this is what he does, and he does an outstanding job with it and keeping an eye on what those short interests look like, what those squeezes really look like, John. I think there's a lot of reasons why this is a pretty interesting one. You know, it's a franchise with a mobile game history that is really, really starting to click pretty well out of Israel. They're doing things, it looks like, the right way, and that's why they've got this double upgrade. This thing, I think, has plenty of more room, and that squeeze, especially after what he had to say to us, that squeeze is not over yet. And like you said, John, 7 days to get it finished. I would say the next few days, you better keep an eye on PLTK.
Yeah, I certainly will, Pete. All right. Well, let's take a look at sports here in a sec, Pete, because you and I love talking about sports, and also, of course, sharing videos like this one, this pass protection. And Pete, if you have a running back that can do what Travion Henderson can do, and he can block, maybe catch some passes, tell me this guy doesn't go high in a draft.
I could watch Travion Henderson in pass protection all day.
I will say this too, John. The NFL has finally figured out that running backs are not a bad part of the team. It's actually the winning part of the team. You can run the ball, you can throw the ball. That's that simple. You can throw the ball when you've got a running back like this, John, who actually is willing to get out there and block the way he is. Some guys really are focused on that. Some aren't. But I will tell you this kid is an absolute animal. You can see the speed on the run that he's got right there. Look at him get all the way down into the end zone. So he can run. He also can pass protect. That's what you want. And some of these blocks are on running plays as well. They had two running backs this year at Ohio State that are both going to be absolute freak shows, I think, at the NFL level. Henderson is a physical specimen. If you see this guy outside of his uniform, you're going to look at him and go, what in the world? Is that DK Metcalf or something? I mean, that's what he looks like. He's not as tall, but he is built like a brick, you know what.
That's a scary look, Pete, when you got the guard and tackle pulling out there in front of him.
Not a bad offensive line either at Ohio State, John. I mean, they got one or two or three guys every single year that are quality players that can get to the NFL and make a difference. But I tell you, I was so mystified over the last couple of years how the NFL has completely screwed it up. Every GM, except for Philadelphia, was pretty stupid about how they approached this whole thing. Philadelphia was smart enough to say, you know what? We lack one thing, a running game. We lack a running back. And they went out and got one of the best in football. And he's a little bit older. Who cares? That guy is a freak show as well, John. And anytime you ever see what that guy can do on the squat or some of the leg press things that he can do, I would say that that's the running back that if you're a linebacker, you don't want him coming at you.
No. He's stronger than most of the guys he goes up against, and that's something just like speed. Speed kills, so does strength, and he's got both.
Yeah.
All right, well, how about the rest of sports, Pete? What do you got?
Well, let's go to the United Football League, John, the UFL. I think it's kind of interesting, and you know why? It kicks off on the 28th. The season begins again, and I got to give The Rock some credit because when you look at spring football leagues, most of them have been okay at best, not very great with their numbers and all the rest of it. But ever since this merger of the XFL and the USFL, things are starting to come together. And I will say this too, they've got some very quality players. They got some high quality coaches. Bob Stoops is down there in Arlington. You got Skip Holtz down there in Birmingham. You've got some great ones. Anthony Becht has been an unbelievable. He's a friend of mine. He and I worked at NBC Sports together for a while. He's done a great job coaching for St. Louis as well, John. But this kicks off the 28th. June 14th is when they got the championship game. There's only 8 teams in the league, but maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Some of these leagues, they want to have more. Some want to have less. You're going to play how many games and all the rest of it. But I will say this. So Fox owns 50%. The Rock, along with Redbird Capital, owns the other 50%, and The Rock's wife. But here's some of the numbers, John. TV viewership growth. They went up 34% last year for the UFL, and the championship game was up also 23%. They had 1.5 million people watching the championship game. So for the people who want to flush this down the toilet, I think you got to realize this actually is a pretty damn good league. They've done a lot of things right. The NFL, hell, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but the NFL actually reached out and grabbed some of the things that the UFL were doing to bring over to the NFL. Well, I didn't like what they did. It was the kickoff, which I think is the stupidest thing ever. But it looks like, John, they're going to probably alter that this year. But you got to give the UFL a little bit of credit. They've gone out there. They've changed a few things. It's not exactly the NFL rules. And for that, I give them a lot of credit. And in some cases, I think they've done a really good job with it. So I don't know about you, but I think it's, you're always kind of hankering some football. A lot of these guys are going to be playing in the NFL as well because they end on June 15th, which means they have plenty of time to get into the NFL as well, John. It's almost like a little bit of a producer for the NFL now. So could be pretty interesting. And I don't know, are you interested in it? Are you going to watch some of these games, do you think?
I am, Pete. I was looking it up. They topped 32 million viewers last year. Now, that's not every game. Every game, the season average was 850,000, which, by the way, ain't that far from the NBA. And that's just a little dig at the NBA. Also, their post-game shows, and they run those, Pete, on YouTube, Facebook, the ESPN app, and so forth. those ratings were up 20% versus 2023 as well. If they stay on the track that they're on and or accelerate even faster, which is what I'm predicting, Pete, that they will accelerate faster, you're talking about a winning bet by Fox, by Redbird, and by The Rock. So, and he's out there touting it like crazy. So look for him to be one of the main drivers and doing interviews and all the rest, because not only does he have a vested interest, but he really likes football. That's what he played at the U in Miami. And he'd really like to see this be a big deal, and it could be.
I'll tell you one thing you got to give him credit for too, John. He capitalized on something. He wasn't quite at the level, no offense to The Rock, to be in the NFL. He just wasn't, right? I mean, he tried, didn't work. But he was, in a way, think about the money he made in wrestling, John, that was giving higher money than a lot of the guys that were playing in the NFL. So it was actually a stroke of luck for him to not be in the NFL and be in the WWE and make the kinds of money that he made. And let's be honest, I mean, building a huge foundation of money that just got bigger and bigger and bigger, a little like a guy like Bill Goldberg and some of these other guys. You know, I mean, honestly, these guys are, the money that they made in wrestling probably dwarfs what they would have at the time been making in the NFL. So NFL money is getting a lot different, as we all know. Speaking of the NFL, John, the New York Giants have made a hell of a lot of moves that are pretty interesting. So one is, last Friday they signed Jameis Winston. Now, do I think he's a great quarterback? I absolutely do not. Is he a quality guy who could be great in the locker room and step in under an injury situation? I think so. He's only 31 years old. He's got a little bit more fuel in the tank. He's got 154 touchdowns against 111 interceptions. That's the problem. He throws too many interceptions, you know, when you consider where he is on the touchdowns. Now, they signed Russell Wilson yesterday, John, who's 36 years old. He clearly will be the starter. Now, Russell has 350 touchdowns against 111 interceptions. Russell is a special player. Whether you like him or hate him, his personality, all the other things, you know, everybody's got their thoughts. But he's a quality quarterback who I think is the right guy to probably be at the helm for the New York Giants. Here's the question for you and I heard Mike Tannenbaum, our friend, was talking about this as well. What do you do in the draft with the third pick? Do you still go for a quarterback, or do you slide over and say, well, we got the quarterback, maybe now we can get whomever is there, because you got a lot of them there at that point? I'm going to say this. You still take a quarterback. If it's Shedeur Sanders, that's who you've got. I think you take him, and here's why. Let him sit for a year underneath a couple of veterans who are out there. They've got a little bit of gray beard going and all the rest of it. He can learn from them. He's not going to get the crap kicked out of him, John. He can save that for Jameis and for Russell to get the crap kicked out of him. That offensive line didn't exactly light it up last year. And that gives him an opportunity to watch how they do things, how to be a pro and all the rest of it. But what do you think? How does the Giants, how do they go into this thing? They could maybe trade down and with a little bit of hope, because I'll tell you what, I think Jackson Dart might be the second best anyway. So I know he's projected later in the first round. If you pulled yourself back and had a couple of trades, you might have a good shot at getting a guy like Jackson. Maybe. Jackson Dart is a stud.
Yeah, well, Pete, what they could do is trade down.
Yep.
They might be able to trade down, especially if somebody else is really desperate to get either Shedeur or Travis Hunter. They could trade down maybe a couple spots and get a Dart, and maybe, depending how it goes, still get Travis or Shedeur. I think if Shedeur is there and nobody's there to trade with, I think you still take Travis, not Shedeur, if you're the Giants. I think he's a difference maker for them right now. Shedeur needs to mature, and he needs to put on some weight. And if he comes in at 215, 220, great. But he's never been playing at that size, not since I've been watching him, Pete. And I watched him a lot with the Buffalo, Colorado Buffalo, of course. But I would be, without advertising it, I would be, sitting there just saying, yep, I'm going to take Shedeur, I'm going to take Shedeur, I'm going to take Shedeur. and see what 5, 6, 7, and 8 say about them trading up to take him. I could take Dart and Travis if I swap places with those guys. That's what I think.
Yep. No, I think there's a lot of different ways to play it, but I think trading down, if you want to have the quarterback that you think is there, then I guess you take Shedeur. If not, and you're willing to take a little bit of a gamble, you could get some picks or whatever, John. I mean, there's a lot of ways to trade down not too far. In that top 5, top 10, there's always a lot of wiggle room for a lot of potentially like a first this year, a first next year, or whatever it might be, right? And so from that perspective, that's where the GM makes his money, right? I mean, that's why you pay your GM what you pay him, is to make the right decisions, not the wrong decisions, but risky decisions as well. And I think this one makes sense to me, along with you, that I would probably go the route of going down. And if Shedeur happens to go before I get him, like I said, I like Jackson Dart almost as equally as much, maybe even better, because the kid is special, and he's just as special, I think, as Shedeur. So could get pretty interesting for them.
Well, and I'll leave you guys with this one, Pete. So last week I made that horrible pick actually it was this week. It was Monday, I think. I took the Lakers down there playing at the Magic. Today we've got Phoenix getting 4.5 at home against the Celtics. Do you think the Celtics blow them out at home, Pete? I'm thinking no. This is a close game, and I like Phoenix getting the points. So that's my pick for tonight, Pete. That'll be a tonight game in the NBA.
I like that pick a lot, John, although I might be on the other side of that pick.
You like Boston, right?
You know, when I watch Boston play, these guys, they are so damn good. It's like every guy that you see there, you just go, wow, these guys, there's a reason why these guys have had a really great run for a few years now. They're still very young. They still got an ungodly amount of talent out there. And you know what? There's a lot of excitement in Boston about what they can do and the playoffs and everything else. I might be on the other side of that one with you, against you. So we'll see how that one goes. But travel is a big deal. And you know what? I don't know enough about Boston this year, John. I don't know how much those guys do the quote-unquote load management. I hope it's not much, if at all. But if they do, is this one of those where they sit? I don't know. So I'd have to explore that a little bit more. But I'll take Boston just because it's Boston and they seem like they're just on a roll, man.
All right. Well, we'll give you guys an update tomorrow on Sports with Pete and John. Thanks for joining us today, folks, for the Rebels Edge. Remember, register for that cash flow summit tomorrow at the market close, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Just go on over and click on that. And Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. with the Rebels Edge to remind you to register. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.